Hi, welcome to the video. Today I'll be showing you how to hand finish your guitar's fretboard, which will greatly improve the feel, the look and the playability whilst leaving it silky smooth in your hand, feeling like $1 million. First stage in this process is of course to remove your strings. If you've never removed the strings before, check out my video on how to change your strings, and then we can begin the process of hand finishing the fretboard. So this is probably a bad example to show you because this guitar already has a very nice smooth fretboard. You can see how the wood has a slight sheen about it, not quite a glossy shine, but it has a sheen about it. The frets do have a glossy shine. The edges of the fretboard is quite rounded and smooth, nice to the touch, comfortable on the hands, and that's really what we're aiming for here. Nevertheless, I'll show you the technique I used on all Inferno guitars that I sold between 2006 and 2009, 2010. It's very easy to do, just be careful and make sure you do it right, and you should have very good results. It will make your guitar feel much nicer, much easier to play. So to improve our fretboard today, we'll be using string winder, clean cloth, car polish, masking tape and various grades of automotive sandpaper. So first of all, we're going to mask up the areas of the guitar that we don't want to get scratched with sandpaper. This would include the nut and the headstock. Notice I've left this area of the fretboard clear of tape. And I have placed masking tape around the neck joint on the face of the guitar to protect the paint from scratching. So stage one is to round the corners of the fretboard. If your guitar's never been done before, I would recommend 600 or 800 grit sandpaper. This guitar has been done, so I'll be cheating just for demonstrational purposes, and I'll be going straight to the smoother papers. But for best results, you want to use 600 or 800 grit, I would suggest. So I've just folded the sandpaper in half and half again to make it a little more rigid, a little more firm in my hands. And what I'll be doing is going from one end on the corner of the edge, without scratching the guitar. I'll be running that the entire length of the fretboard, back and forth. May get caught on the frets a little, that's fine. And we're also rounding off the corners of the frets, the ends of the frets as well, to make them smoother. And nicer feeling in your hands as you play. Notice I'm going along the entirety of the fretboard. Don't do little patches like this. Rub, rub, rub. Rub, rub, rub. Do not do it like that, because you're not removing an even amount of material from the surface as you go, which means you can have a wavy effect. And this is why we go from one end to the other. Now, how many times should you do that? Well, it all depends on your guitar. But you should notice after moving the sandpaper back and forth, say 10 times, that you're starting to feel a smoother roundness on the corner, and that's what we're looking for. So how long should you rub it? Until you're happy with the roundness of the corner, when you can feel it's more comfortable to hold in your hand. That could be 15, 20 times, 30 times. It's really up to you. But don't overdo it. 30 times, I don't think you'd need any more than that on any given guitar. Do the other edge also, from one end to the other, as many times as you did the top edge. Count how many times you take your hand back and forth. If you did 15 passes on the top edge, do 15 on the bottom. Provided you're happy with the softness, provided you're happy with the roundness, then that's all that matters. Once you have completed this stage, take your other finer sandpapers and do the same. Use the numbers on the sandpaper as a guide. Start off with the lowest number, 600 or 800 grit. This is rougher sandpaper than the higher numbered sandpapers, such as 1200, 2000, 3000, 5000. Always go from the smallest number to the highest number. For the next stage, we'll be polishing the frets. Sanding, in fact. But this is stage 1 of the polishing process. For this step, I would recommend 1200 grit sandpaper if you've never done this before. I have torn off a very small piece of sandpaper, folded it in half, and without touching the surface of the wood, and while only running the paper along the fret, the metal bar, I'll gently rub that back and forth, and I'll count how many passes I do. I'll count how many passes I do and perform this task with each fret. Again, without rubbing the wood, only rubbing the metal fret. Repeat this process on all frets with all grades of sandpaper. After every 5 or 6 frets, you may notice that the paper is wearing and that metal is being left behind on the sandpaper. Flip it over and use the other side for the next 5 to 8 frets, and so on. Sanding the frets this way is also handy if you have an old guitar which has had a lot of use and may have small nicks on the frets from the strings. Small nicks can be removed with sandpaper. However, very serious nicks on an old guitar, that particular fret may need to be replaced. However, that's usually only in extreme cases. You may find that the paper has touched the wood and left some little marks. Don't worry about that. We'll clear that up in the next stage. So in this stage, we'll be sanding the wood between the frets, including the positioning dots, if you should have them. Again, I've taken a small piece of sandpaper, folded it, and I'll be sanding with the grain of the timber on the fretboard. Just like that. Going all the way to the edge, white plastic binding on the edge. And do this for all of the areas in between the frets where you have exposed timber. This particular fretboard is rosewood. This works nicely also on mahogany fretboards, maple fretboards. Repeat this process on all areas of exposed timber between the frets, and do it with all grades of sandpaper. Now I'll be taking a little car polish and applying it on the fretboard. I'll just use an old squeezy bottle to make distribution a bit neater. Take our clean cloth, dab it into the wood and into the cloth at the same time. And now we scrub. Go back and forth. Go with the grain of the timber on the fretboard. This is actually smoothing the timber and smoothing, polishing the metal frets, the plastic edges, everything. And if you're doing it right, you should notice that your cloth is filthy. Now I've just cleaned this guitar, so it's not dirt, it's actually fine bits of wood and even fine bits of the metal. And while this makes everything nice and shiny, so it looks pretty, the real reason we're doing it is to make it as smooth as possible. And now if we look at the timber, we can actually see a sheen. We can actually see a sheen in the raw timber. There's no paint on that wood to give it the shine. It's just smooth. The frets are also very shiny, which means they're very smooth. This will make for nice playing. Smooth surface means little friction, which means little resistance for your fingers as you slide from fret to fret. Also, it's just so much more comfortable in your hand. Feels nicer against your fingertips. And it does look good. It makes your cheaper guitar look more expensive than it really is. And it feels more expensive to play than it really is. Yeah, that feels nice. Very smooth. It's like the tabletop. Just like the tabletop feels smooth. That feels smooth. Remove your masking tape and make sure you haven't left any scratches. So the guitar's fretboard is nice and smooth, and we could be happy with that. I'm going to go one stage further and use an even finer polish and wax, in fact, to seal the timber. Or you can use one of the many commercially available fretboard preparations. I'm just allowing this wax-laden polish to soak into the timber for a few minutes. 2 to 3 minutes should do fine. Regardless of what it says on the polished bottle, rub it away while it's still moist. Most car polishers will say let it dry to a haze and then wipe it off. That's fine for paintwork, but in this case, we'll be polishing it while it's still moist. Now, being a polish, this is actually removing a very, very fine layer of material. This is what helps smooth it, just like the sandpaper does, although the sandpaper is obviously much rougher. but also because it's a wax and polish, the wax will also be filling in small, tiny little small nicks and dents. Keep doing this for a couple of minutes. Do the whole fretboard in its entirety, just like when we were sanding the edges. So we can see from the cloth that a considerable amount of material has actually been removed. Your fretboard improvement is now complete and you're ready to restring your guitar. If you're not sure how to get your strings back on, check out my video on how to change your strings. Thanks for watching, enjoy your guitar, and bye for now.